All right, Chief Sneed, I'm so honored to be here to work on a show with you to kind of educate the public on some of the things that are happening in your world. What do you got to say to that? What was our purpose of doing this?
Well, actually, I'd like to say, the honor is really all mine. I think this is just a great opportunity and a great medium to where we can really communicate to the public the direction we're moving as a tribe, the direction we're moving as a tribal organization, and certainly as a government as a whole. So I just appreciate the opportunity to be able to do that.
Thank you. We've talked about it off and on for a while. One of the bigger issues that we run into with our small community, being as it is, and we're tribal and we're very tight knit, but communication.
Sure.
Communication between the public and the government sector has always been kind of a cutoff area, right, back and forth. Do you feel like that's something that you've really put a lot of energy into to kind of connect?
Well, I think that this is really the first step in trying to do that. I mean, we live in a time now where we're more connected, they say, than ever before. But in reality, if you look at how we're interacting with one another, there's more disconnect taking place. And so this is really just a step, I think, in the right direction to sit down and just have a discussion and to talk about the goals for and objectives for the tribe, again, for the government. And really where we're trying to get to, over the course of the next couple of years, where we'd like to be in 5 years, 10 years, and so on. So I think this is just using the medium in an appropriate way to get the word out to folks.
Absolutely.
And then if that, hopefully that generates more discussion, at community club meetings, around the dinner table. Then maybe questions start coming in from the public,
right,
or suggestions, because I think one of the things that is sorely lacking, not just in our community, but in the nation as a whole, oftentimes we're really good about complaining about things.
That's true.
And not necessarily coming forward with ideas and solutions. And so I certainly want to hear from the community. There's no one person has all the answers. I want to hear what the community members have to say. I'd like to hear their vision for the tribe as well, because it is going to take all of us working together and pulling together. I love the word community, because really when you break it down, it's common unity, right?
Yeah.
And what is our common unity? We're Cherokee, first and foremost. And so we've got to get back to that. And it's something that it only happens one way. We've talked about this. It's the face-to-face communication.
That's it.
And today we do most of our communicating through text messages and emails,
social media.
That's it. So I think this is just really trying to lay the foundation, if you will.
You're right.
For this face-to-face communication, and more important than speaking, but listening and really hearing.
You're right.
What the people have to say. So.
You're right. You're absolutely right, and I'm excited. I think people have to start breaking down their own personal barriers, start to listen. We can meet. We can meet in the middle on a lot of issues. We tend to look at things black, white, this or that.
Right.
There's a lot of times we can do all that. We can combine those efforts and really make it work for everybody. We have to bend a little bit at times, but that's something we need to start doing, all of us.
Well, I think what's important, when we talk about having these face-to-face discussions and really hearing what the other person has to say, is that I remember coming to the realization many years ago that it's really a dangerous thing to only surround yourself with people who agree with you.
That's true.
Because the reality is people who may have a different viewpoint than you have on a particular issue, they know something you don't.
That's true.
Right? And you know something they don't. And so even if we disagree on a subject matter, we can sit down and have discourse. We can have dialogue. There are things we can agree to disagree on. But at the end of the day, it has to be from a position of mutual respect, that even if we disagree on something, that we have mutual respect for one another, simply because we're human beings, and if it's another community member, because we're both Cherokee. We've got that in common. So.
That's right. We're going to be here for a long time. After all this stuff ends.
Exactly right.
We're going to be here together side by side. So that leads me into my first question. We've got some new legislation that hit the table last month, a month before. Mm-hmm. Tell me a little bit about that legislation, and starting with the first, I guess.
Sure. Well, if I could kind of digress a little bit first, a little bit about my philosophy on government and the purpose of government, and oftentimes when I talk to community members or other elected officials too, and we're just having discussion about government in general, I say, well, what do you believe the purpose of government is? What's the purpose of government?
That's a great question.
It's one that doesn't get asked very often.
That's true.
And oftentimes what I get in response is kind of well, gosh, I never thought about that.
Yeah.
And so from my perspective and my philosophy on government is that first and foremost, the government's main objective and purpose is to ensure the rights of the individual.
Okay.
To ensure that two things, that number one, that the government does not impose on an individual's rights, and number two, that one individual doesn't impose on another individual's rights. Those are really the two foundational pieces that everything that I do as a political leader is rooted and grounded in that foundation.
Gotcha.
After that, then comes general welfare. But if you, in my mind, if you ignore those two foundational pieces, then you've missed the whole point of government.
That's right.
The general welfare piece is one that, if that's the main focus, then what that turns into is you basically grow a very large budget trying to provide services. And it's a good thing that we can provide services. I'm grateful for the services we
Right.
provide, but there has to be efficiency to that. And when I talk about government, just governments in general, that over time, what tends to happen with the government is it just tends to just continue to grow over time.
Right.
Programs, services, positions, and we're a little bit we're not a little bit different. We're a lot different than a municipality, because a municipality, the only way that they can garner revenue is through taxation. Our situation, we're much better off because we do have an enterprise,
Right.
a gaming enterprise, that generates a great deal of revenue for us. But nevertheless, governments, like individuals, can go broke. We have to be wise with our spending. We have to be strategic about our planning
Right.
and the programs that we do fund. Because I think that the danger is that if we're not strategic, then what happens is we tend to, with right motive oftentimes, there's a need in the community or a perceived need, and we say, hey, let's create a program. And early on, when there's a lot of revenue and not very many programs, you can do that.
That's true.
But when the government starts to grow to the size that ours is now, we can't continue to do that.
We come from a very odd history, trauma history.
Sure.
Where we didn't have anything at all for a long time. I remember even in the early 90s,
Sure.
Before gaming took off, not really knowing that we didn't have anything.
Right.
You know, just not even realizing we were living in poverty
Right.
For the most part. And then it hit, and it's almost that double-edged sword where it's like all of a sudden you go from poor and broke tribe one day, hustling and earning
Right.
everything we had to pave a road
Sure.
or to take care of an elder, to overnight we're $1 billion industry.
Right.
You know, and in just 20 years now we've built that into something. But
Right.
what we didn't, I feel like we have questions on, did we adjust things the way we should have to kind of the mentality of the public, and not to blame anybody.
No.
I think that happens with anybody. You go from a case for having nothing to having everything. It can lead to some problems.
It's like,
and I guess
like hitting the lottery.
that is, and it changes you overnight almost, and the mentality has to change with it, or else you're going to run into problems
Right.
and social inequality problems
Right.
and social government problems.
And you're absolutely right about that. And all of it comes back to education.
Right.
And that's one area that I feel as a government we have just a huge responsibility to our young people. And we do a great job with our school system. The tribe has always done a great job of ensuring that our students, and especially since we have gaming revenue, to ensure that our students at the schools have what they need, that the staff have what they need
Right.
to equip our students. But those are kind of high level
Yeah.
decisions. And I think that with these, we have to be strategic. We have to take a step back and say, where are there areas of lack in the education system for our young people, and when we're talking about finances for our adults as well. When I was teaching, I incorporated financial literacy into my curriculum. It wasn't part of the curriculum, but I saw a need.
Right.
And what drove the need for me was that, at that time our students were getting, when they turned 18, getting this, huge sum of money.
Yeah.
And on the surface, people would say, "Oh, that's a good thing. They're getting $60,000, $70,000, $80,000. Isn't that great?" Well, if you know how to handle $60,000 or $70,000 or $80,000, yeah, that's a great thing. But if you have zero experience in handling money at all,
Right.
and that's not saying just about our students. That's this nation.
And I think that's what I was alluding
Yeah.
to. We went overnight from
Sure.
nothing to something. We have children turning 18
Yeah.
with no income. All of a sudden you have $150,000.
Sure.
It ballooned way up.
Yeah.
And it's a great thing, and it's a double-edged sword.
That's
We've
right.
also got to have that education, as you mentioned, that foundation.
Right. Well, what I saw in teaching and the relationships that I had with my students, that there were students that I had that were never in trouble. They were good students. They made good grades. They had big plans to go on to college and do things. But then when you're 18, and I used to say to my students all the time, if you'd have given me that sum of money when I was 18, I probably wouldn't be here today.
Right.
Because I certainly didn't have the maturity level or the experience
Yeah.
in dealing with finances to be able to handle that. And when I say this nation, I mean the United States of America. It astounds me that in this nation that financial literacy training is not a
Right.
required part of the curriculum.
I still wonder at my age
nationwide.
if I've got the ability to handle $150,000 in my bank account right now. You know, so I know it's a struggle for our local families, our community here, but it's a good thing. We've done a lot of good with that, and our government has done really well over in general over the years of making that a positive thing for our tribe.
Well, back to my point about solutions. So oftentimes it's easier to kind of step back and observe things and say, well, I see a problem here, there, and everything else. But if I don't come back with solutions, then what am I really doing? I'm part of the problem.
Right.
So you know, everything we just talked about, those are areas we need to address. And so the government in general, and really going back to my philosophy on government and what we need to do as an administration, is to take all of the wonderful resources we've been blessed with. It's just amazing to me that we have the ability to provide excellent employment and benefits to our tribal members, and those are all positives. But we're at a point right now where we have to ensure that this government operates efficiently, because in the way I look at this is that I want the same opportunities, and that's really what it comes down to. With the advent of gaming revenue and other tribal levy increasing and everything else, we've had the ability to create all these wonderful opportunities for our tribal members. Post-secondary education, going to university, all the way up through a PhD, all paid for. That's amazing.
That's amazing.
Housing opportunities, healthcare opportunities. These are all opportunities. I feel it's my responsibility and this government's responsibility that is seated now to ensure that those same opportunities are there for my grandchildren,
generations
and for my
down.
great-grandchildren, and then for their grandchildren, and on down the road. So, but if we don't lay that foundation now for how this government should function, then, as I stated earlier, governments like individuals can go broke, and they do. So I just wanted to lay that foundation.
Because that leads you into the decision making that you do day to day.
That's correct.